So, this guide will be reviewing Necromancer builds for Season 2. I already did something similar for Druid. Right now, Druid is number 1, Rogue is number 2, Sorceress is number 3, Barbarian is number 4, and Necro is number 5. Now, why I did my Druid first, I'm going to do my Necro now. Mostly because I need to do a little bit of loot reshuffling on this character, so fuck it, I'll bang it out while I can. To cover why Necro is at the bottom right now. So, Necro has a couple of issues in this patch. Alright, let's talk about some things. So, before the patch, Necromancer had a few builds that were viable. Number 1 was Bone Spear. That was number 1. Number 2 was straight minion build. Was AFK minion. Number 3 was Bloodlance. Number 4 was some combination of Shadow or Blight. Then after that, you have the rest of the shit. Blood Surge, Bone Spirit, whatever else you want to lump it. Now things have changed. Okay. Now one thing, Necro has had decent basic generators. You don't want to use them, but you can get some value out of them. Bone Splinter is an easy way to apply Vulnerable. Hemorrhage gives you Blood Orbs relatively consistently. Decompose is solid for corpse generation if you don't want other skills. And Reap gives you damage reduction. So your basics are pretty much in the same state as they were before. Why am I talking about Necromancers in a worse place? Every single build that Necromancer had going for it got nerfed in some way. Now some of the builds are perfectly fine. Some builds got hammered hard. So let's look at the key ones, right? Bone Spear is still top dog. And a lot of people look at me and go, what are you talking about? Bone Spear is terrible. Bone Spear is still top dog because even though Crit got nerfed and even though Vulnerable got nerfed, they still get to take advantage of both of them. Corpse Tendrils is still broken. Corpse Tendrils still cooks. So, because Corpse Tendrils is just so good at pull everybody together, you chuck a Bone Spear, everybody's vulnerable, you get bonus crit, and it just obliterates everything. Corpse Tendrils is still very good. Bone Spear, even though they nerfed crit stacking and vulnerable stacking, is still very good. Okay. So Bone is relatively fine. No, Bone is not relatively fine. Because they've nerfed a lot of the key passives. Ossified Essence got another knock against it. Evulsion, Rapid Ossification, Serration, Compound Fracture. If you're running a strictly pure Bone build, out of all of these skills, you're more than likely going to run Serration. You're going to run Compound Fracture. You might run Evulsion. You're not going to run Rapid Ossification. You're not going to run Evulsion. It's very rare that you do. And even Ossified, if you're a Summon Mancer, you can make an argument against Ossified for maybe Caitlin's Edict, if you're a Summon Mancer. Whereas before, if you're a Summon Mancer, it doesn't matter. If you chose Bone, you're still running Ossified for the bonus damage, because the rest of your build is pretty good. Not here. Then even when you go to Paragon... Shit. When you go to Paragon, alright, take a look. Where is it? Bone Graph gets another nerf to it. And at this point, it's like, well, Bone keeps getting nerfed. How is it still the best build? Because it gets to take advantage of all these pools. Bone Spear itself pierces. So it's very good for just shoot it, and as long as you hit something, you get value out of it. As long as you hit something, you're getting value out of it. Not a lot of the other builds there. Bloodlance is supposed to be in a good position. realistically speaking, Blood Lance is in a relatively good position because there's other factors in play that make it relatively good. It overpowers. There's a lot of aspects that are viable for the build. There's a lot of things that make Blood Necro good on Blood Lance. Blood Surge doesn't get that benefit. In theory, it doesn't make sense, because instead of hitting in a straight line, it's hitting in a circular around you. So if you want to make a close range, a brawly Necro, why wouldn't Blood Surge be good? Because Blood Surge has one legendary aspect for it, whereas Blood Lance has 4. And that one difference is what makes Blood Lance so much better. Because if you look at what I have equipped, right, for offensive, that's something else. There's 1. There's 2. There's 3. I'm hunting the 4th one. I don't have the 4th one. These 3 aspects right here, which are relatively easy, and you see I need to pull some stuff out of my stash for that, right? Here's the problem. This is the only one that Blood Surge has. Blood Surge has to rely on generic blood support to get value. In addition to that, the other thing is that Blood Lance has the low essence cost. It's the lowest essence cost out of any of the core skills that are available to you here. It's 15 by default, by the way. That's 20, 25, 25, 30. Blood Surge is the most expensive. So the problem that you have with this is that Blood Surge doesn't give you the same value. And you might look at it and say, well, you can get some healing out of it. You can get healing out of just generic blood skills. There's no point to doing that. Blood Surge is in a terrible position. Okay. Shadow got a buff, right? Shadow had to have gotten a buff. They finally fixed the key passives that are over here for I believe it's Terror and Gloom now work properly. They work like they're supposed to. So that's a win, right? No, because they nerfed how Shadow DOT works. So Sever is terrible still because of the fact that it didn't get a buff, it didn't get a nerf, it didn't go up or down. And it has no secondary factor to it besides just Ice Swing. So, the majority of your Shadow perks are Shadow Blight perks. Have to do with Shadow Blight. Have to do with Shadow damage, which are most commonly around damage over time. And if you see now how it says Shadow Blight's damage is increased by 100% of your Shadow damage over time bonus. Okay? The problem with that is that because Sever builds tend not to build Shadow damage over time, they don't get to take advantage of that. Which means they are running... Their options for a key passive are more than likely Kalen's Edict. Because Ossified Essence doesn't help you unless you run Bone Spear alongside it. Bone Spirit, I should say. Rathma's Vigor doesn't really help you unless you're running, you know, Hemorrhage as your basic. So because of that, it's in a terrible state. All the Blight builds are in a terrible state. Because Blight damage and damage over time got nerfed. Tick rate got nerfed. Damage stacking got nerfed. So a lot of the value that you got out of Blight goes out the window. So Blood Lance is good. Bone Spear is good. What about straight minion build, right? How do you fuck up straight minion build? All of the basic units are still the same. All your warriors, still okay. Shadow Mages got a little buff. Cold Mages got a little bit of a buff. Just a little bit. Okay? Because you can now get the aspect, the Blizzard aspect on Mages doesn't just have to be on Cold Mages. You can get that value off of any of the Mages. Although Bone Mages still don't get value out of that because, you know, Bone Mages kill themselves in order to attack. So that's not very good. Now, minions got nerfed a few ways. So, Kalen's Edict got a little bit of a buff because they cut the time in half from 4 seconds to 2 seconds. None of the other core skills really changed around it. Army of the Dead got a little bit of a buff because the skeletons that pop up and explode now leave behind corpses. So that's good for summoning. Here's the major issue. Inspiring Leader, time got cut in half. That's good. That's a buff. Bonded in Essence, got a buff. That's good. What is the problem? Alright, so Death's Defense used to be that minions could no longer couldn't die, basically, in one hit. It made it so that the more points you put in, the less health would be taken off in a single hit. So, if you maxed it, it was 30%. Your minions could not lose more than 30% of their maximum life in a single hit. Damage over time effects didn't work. This meant that your minions, besides damage over time effects, were 4 shots. You got 4 shots. You could walk into a boss and each minion could get 4 shots. That's the most that could happen. Now, they put that in base for all your minions. They comboed all your minion shit together. So golems, skeletons, all work the same now. They all get that benefit. But it's in the lowest version possible at 70%. Meaning all of your minions can be 2-shot. And I have seen that happen firsthand until I got Bob here leveled up. Until Bob here actually got some value. What Death's Defense does now is it gives your minions up to 12% armor and up to 24% increased resistance to all elements. Now, the resistance to all elements on minions is terrible. Because minions don't inherit resistances. They can't inherit resistance. They can inherit armor. They can inherit thorns. They can get attack speed. They cannot inherit resistances. So because of this, essentially, this is great until you hit World Tier 3. And as soon as you hit World Tier 3, and the game says, okay, fuck your resistances, and chops them in half, Death's Defense then becomes worthless, because now that means your minions lose their resistances. You could look and say, well, that's armor, 12% increased armor. That's nice. That's not worth 3 skill points. Like, would you rather run 3 skill points for 12% armor, or would you rather your minions heal more? Would you rather your minions attack more? Would you rather your minions do more damage? Any of the other 3 at 3 points are better than that because you can get 12% armor on a roll. Well, I'll check something real quick. Just real quick. See if I have one. I don't know if I have it on this character. I don't think I do. I don't. But you can get your minions armor that way. So minions are still good, but minions got nerfed. And I've definitely noticed the nerfs. What about Bone Spirit? I have a character I've been working on. I finally got it cooked today. The build is pretty much set. I'm missing one piece, but I can do without. The thing is, Bone Spirit's in a very successful place right now. Because Bone Spirit can give you so much value if you just go suck, spirit, suck, spirit. You go tendrils and spirit. It's kind of a meme build that I'm running. It has no core skill in it. It is corpse explosion and basic attack spam when everything else is on cooldown. And then I have, I have Bone Spirit and I have Blood Wave to kill things. And I'm using blood orbs and I'm using crits and I'm just annihilating everything. And it's working pretty well. Bone Spirit on its own, though, is actually relatively bad. Especially in a pure bone build. In a pure bone build, it's not very good because it's using all your essence. You're not getting to cast bone spears like you want to. It's a nice option to run in minion builds where you don't need a lot of things. You don't need a lot of slots, right? You don't need a lot of skill points. Because the biggest thing is if you decide you want to go a no core skill tree, right? You want no core skill on your tree. I've been trying those types of meme builds. I think they're kind of fun. If you want to do something like that, then you need to figure out a way to get down to this tree right here. In a summoning build, where you basically have 2 sets of minions, you have a basic, you have 2 sets of minions, you have explosion or tendrils, you have spirit, and you have an ulti. That's a pretty good setup. I like that setup. But on its own, Bone Spirit's not good. It suffers from a lack of aspects. There's one aspect that Bone Spirit itself takes advantage of, and then you're using a Corpse Tendril one to take advantage of it, to boost it. That's it. That's the combo. A lot of the Fortify passives and a lot of the Blood passives got a little bit of a buff as well. However, the big problem that I have is that they still haven't done anything to make Curses more viable. They still haven't done anything to make Bone Prison more viable. And these are the least used abilities on Necromancer. Necromancer players don't like using Bone Prison. They don't like using the Curses. Most Necros don't like Corpse Explosion, but they run it because it's valuable. It doesn't have a cooldown. It doesn't have a mana cost. It's a decent option. If you're not running Skeletons, you do need a way to consume corpses. And the only other way you can do that is with Explosion. You only have 2 options for actually consuming a corpse, which is necessary for proccing some of your skills, like Grim Harvest. So, right now, in my opinion, Necromancer has done nothing to fix survivability. Your Blood Mist, which is shit, is still your only option if you're specifically looking for a defensive, mobility, escape, crowd control. All of those are in this one skill. That's all you get access to. They still don't have a cheat death ability. They still don't have a get agile free card. They still, like, Sorceress has a get agile free card. Druid has a get agile free card. Rogue has a get agile free card. They don't have a get agile free card. I kind of don't like that. I wish they had something besides Blood Mist that gave you options. Their damage numbers are still very strong, but I think at the end of the day, the overpower buffs don't move Blood up. Blood Lance still stays where it was. Blood Surge is still trash. The Bone skills got a nice buff, because the Bone skills are now more mandatory for high damage builds, because they take advantage of crit and vulnerable, instead of one or the other. I really think that the biggest issue that Necromancer has is, I think that the early game grind of Necromancer is terrible. A lot of people say that Barb and Druid are the 2 worst early game characters for grinding. I would disagree. I think Barb is fine. I think Barb is okay, 1 to 50. Necro is so painful. Druid and Necro are the 2 most painful characters to level, 1 to 50 in my opinion. Because the problem with Necro is how frail they are. They don't get access to good legendaries and good uniques until you're over 50. Whereas if you look, like the one that I just leveled was rocking 2 legendaries until I was 52, 53. And one of them was Barrier from Codex of Power. The other one was Blood Orb's reduced cooldown from the Codex of Power. Those were the only 2 things that I was rocking, because the Blood Wave one, which is great for an ultimate, that's great to have, doesn't unlock, you can't get it to drop more until later levels, until you're over 50. If you look at, you know, your uniques don't drop until World Tier 3. Most of your Blood Lance skills don't drop until the 40s. I think, same thing with Bone. Most of the time, your early game drops that you get are minions. +2 warriors. +2 mages. Corpse Tendril, 1. I think that really holds Necromancer back from being